Welcome to Satsang. दीक्षित भैया जाके उनको बोल देना 1 घंटे तक कोई काम ना करें. So beautiful to be together with you all in Satsang. Apologies for beginning late this evening. Hopefully most of you, or hopefully all of you, were with us in the Ganga Arati that went a little bit later this evening than usual, with some special, beautiful singing at the end in honor of one of India's most famous, renowned, and beloved voices. Singer isn't really the appropriate word. She was more of an icon of sacred music and sacred sound. So we had a beautiful tribute to her at the end that went a bit long. What is wisdom, and how do we gain it? I think the greatest wisdom, and it's actually, as I think about it, it's a beautiful question for the eve before Mahashivratri. Because I think the greatest wisdom is being able to see the difference between truth and falsehood. Everything else is secondary. Whatever knowledge you may accumulate, whatever skills you may accumulate, abilities, facts and figures, whatever it may be, it's all secondary to actually knowing the difference between truth and falsehood. Because the inability to know the difference is actually that which leads to suffering. When we live in falsehood, thinking that we are something we are not, thinking that something is true which is not true, we suffer. And that's the core of this teaching of realizing that we are not the body. This teaching that you'll hear so frequently from me, from the scriptures, from so many different spiritual books and sages and saints and yogis. I mean, it's a core teaching is remember, you have a body, but you're not the body. You have a history, you are not your history. you have a whole drama around the body. Where it's been, what's happened to it, what it's done, what its relationships are, all of that. But you aren't that. You are soul. You are spirit. You are consciousness. You are love. You are truth. Right? So that core truth of stop identifying as the body, which is false, and start identifying as the true self, which is true, is the end of suffering. It's not just that we should know it because it's a good thing to know. It's not just know it because the scriptures say, thou shalt know this. It's know it because if you don't know it, you suffer. All of that we suffer from in life comes from that core ignorance that says, I am my body. What's happened to it? Who did what to it? Who betrayed it? Who abused it? Who lied to it? Who cheated it? Who harmed it in some way? Physically, emotionally, financially, psychologically, so many ways. We identify as that, and so we suffer. I was sharing the other evening in the Ganga Aarti last week about how when I was in America in January, I was back visiting and I had seen on the back of buses, you know, they use buses as billboards, basically. And on the back of a bus, I saw this big banner, big advertisement for some law firm that said, whohurtyou.com. Call us. Not a joke, true story. whohurtyou.com. And I thought, wow. Like, what a perfect and beautiful example of the difference between the cultures. It's not that here in India we're saying, oh, no problem, you can be hurt, that's okay, be a doormat. Nobody's saying that. But we're saying your focus, your attention, your intention, your identification should be on discovering that within you which was not hurt. Discovering that within you which never could be hurt. Rather than putting your attention and intention. I mean, you see that, the billboard, and everybody's mind starts thinking, God, I must have been hurt by somebody at some point. I mean, God, they look like a good law firm. Maybe I'll get some money for it, you know. And suddenly your mind starts going, who hurt me? Right? And I thought, God, thank God. I now live in a world where the emphasis is on let it go. Not because you're a doormat, not because people should walk around abusing and betraying and cheating others, but because when you hold on to it, it keeps you stuck. It prevents you from living in freedom. So, as far as wisdom, I think the core wisdom is being able to shift from falsehood to truth, from identifying as the one who was harmed or cheated or betrayed or hurt in some way, as the one who is a certain size or shape or color or race or religion or sexual orientation or certain bank account or career or job or relationships, and shifting into the awareness of who we really are. It's that beautiful mantra that we chant, that core Vedic mantra of asatoma sadgamaya, tamsoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya, which means, oh God, lead us from falsehood. What falsehood? The falsehood of our separation from the divine. The falsehood of thinking that we are this body, into the truth of our oneness, our inseparableness from the divine. Lead us from darkness to light. Tamsoma jyotirgamaya. Which darkness? The darkness of ignorance, in which we suffer and bring suffering to others, into the light of truth, in which we move from suffering. Lead us from that false identification with that which perishes, that which is born, that which changes, that which dies, means the body, to the true identification as soul. That which is never born, that which never changes, that which never dies. So I think that's the greatest wisdom. And as I began, it's so perfect of a question on the eve of Shivaratri, which of course we'll talk more about tomorrow, and we'll have a special Mahashivaratri meditation tomorrow and a special ceremony, because when we speak about Shiva, one of the names or ways that Lord Shiva is spoken about is the third-eyed one, the one with three eyes, the one of the third eye. And this energy center, what's called the Agya Chakra, is the energy center of that power of discrimination. The ability to see truth from falsehood. It's why we meditate on the third eye. It's why we put the tilak here. It's not just, makeup for sannyasis. It's there for a reason. It's there to remind us every day, oh God, let me use this eye to see, which enables me to see truth from falsehood. Meaning, these two eyes are very good at seeing form. I can look around and I can say man and woman and boy and girl and tall and short and thin and wide and dark and fair and old and young. That's objects. I'm just seeing form, seeing objects. See myself as an object, see others as objects, see the space between us as empty space. This eye sees content. Form keeps changing. Fat, thin, tall, short, old, it all keeps changing. Those who are old eventually perish, become young. Those who are young become old. The form keeps changing. The content does not. The third eye is that which sees content. It means it sees the divine in all. That power of discrimination that's able to see the truth, to see the divine, So that's fundamental wisdom. So when we meditate to open that eye, or put on the tilak, or chant, or do all of the things that we do to work on the third eye, work with the energy centers, the chakras, it's not just some sort of theoretical thing that my chakras should be open. It's because that leads to the end of suffering. It leads to me being able to see truth. So as we move into Mahashivratri, it's yet another aspect to pray to, is help me open that third eye so that I too can see truth, so I too can live in wisdom. And from there, everything else comes. You know, it's interesting if you look at geniuses throughout history. All different cultures, all different races, all different religions, not just smart people, but your actual Einstein-like geniuses, including Einstein. And you actually study how they came up with whatever it was, their thing that made the world know they are a genius. It almost never comes in, I was poring away over my notes, and suddenly I finally solved the equation. It's so frequently things like, I was walking in the woods, and I saw the sun, and then I knew. Or I was drifting off to sleep, and then I saw it and I knew. Or I had my eyes closed, or I was looking at the fire, the flames of the fire in the fireplace, and I knew. It's coming from a place of open-eyed ability to see. So from that, literally everything else comes. Other questions? Any questions that anyone here has? Yes.
I'm wondering how you allow surrender and trust when the next step is not always clear.
How do we surrender and trust when the next step isn't clear? Implicit in, inherent in surrender and trust is that the next step isn't clear. I mean, it's part of the package deal, right? If I know exactly where you're driving me, and I know the road just as much as you know the road, and my eyes are open and I'm watching every turn, well, I haven't really surrendered, right? I mean, I'm letting you drive, but I'm right there. I know exactly where we're going. I'm paying attention. I'm right there to tell you if you've taken a wrong turn. Surrender is when I lie down in the back seat and go to sleep, knowing that you're going to get me there. Or I pull out a book. Or I put in my earbuds and I listen to a podcast and close my eyes because I know you're going to get me there. if I'm backseat driving, literally or metaphorically, it isn't surrender and trust. But you also have to realize on a deep level that we never know the next. We never know what's coming. Any idea that we know what's coming is illusion. I mean, raise your hand if you ever have had something happen in your life that was a total surprise. Right? Has anybody not had something happen in their life that was a total surprise? So, right? Find me a person who has not had at least one, if not thousands, of things happen in their life that were a total surprise. Something we thought was going to happen and it didn't. Something we didn't know was going to happen, it did. The idea that we know what's going to happen is an illusion. Anyway. In order to move beyond that illusion, we have to trust. And we trust, and now this, what I'm speaking to, is trust in the universe. If you're going to trust an actual human being, you want to make sure that it's somebody trustworthy. But when we speak about trust in the universe or trust in the divine, we do it with the awareness that there's an energy, there's a power, there's an intelligence that actually knows much better than we do what we need. And that's actually working for us, not against us. It may not be on the same team as our ego. So it may not always feel like it's working for us. But it is. And anyway, the truth is, what's your alternative to trusting and surrendering, right? I mean, the universe wins every time anyway. We can't outpower any aspect of the divine, of nature. I mean, you can wear your bikini into September, into October, into November, but eventually you're just going to get pneumonia. It's not like the weather is going to say, oh, you're not ready for summer to be over, no problem. All right, we'll just stay warm, no problem. It's going to turn cold anyway. You can boycott it. But you're the one who's going to suffer in the end. We can go to as many anti-aging salons as we'd like to. You can do whatever you want with your hair, with your skin, with your face, with different parts of your body. You can have them pulled and pushed and tucked and injected. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You're not going to actually overpower the power of the universe that says you're getting older. You may be able to disguise it from yourself, but it's not changing the truth. As anybody who's ever stood over the deathbed of a loved one, crying, saying, don't let it be so. No. We cry and we scream But the universe doesn't say, oh, you're not ready for this person to die yet? Okay, and then they rise again. So on little levels, on big levels, on funny levels, on serious levels, we actually have no option but to surrender. The universe is going to win. Your only choice is whether you're going to hold on with a death grip and have the universe essentially pull you along its way as you drag your fingers on the ground, leaving your fingernails behind, or whether you're going to go willingly with it. Those are your only options. So we surrender to the universe with the awareness that A, it's utterly futile not to. B, with the awareness that the universe is on our side, isn't out to get us, is nourishing, nurturing, holding, protecting us, here for us. And with the awareness that through that surrender lies the only possibility of our peace, of our joy, of our freedom. Now, that doesn't mean that we leave our common sense at the door. And so, for example, just because I know the universe is on my side doesn't mean that I don't buckle up when I get in a car. We are co-creating our lives, our existences with the universe. We take care, we use our intelligence, our buddhi. We meditate, we pray, we exercise, we eat well, we buckle up when we get in a car, we do things to take care. Because the universe has also given us free will. So trust and faith in the universe is not this sense of, well, I'm going to become reckless and stupid and just trust that the universe is going to take care of me. As any parent knows, no matter how much you love your children and no matter how much you would do anything and everything for them, there are times they do things that you just can't quite get them out of that situation. I mean, they've just got to now suffer. They keep climbing that tree you tell them to stay out of. Eventually they fall, they break their arm. You can't unbreak it, no matter how much you love them. So you may feed them ice cream while they've got their arm in a cast. But that free will requires that we also work with the universe. So trust and surrender doesn't just mean, you do it all. But it means I'm handing you the reins. You're in the driver's seat. Like Arjuna handed the reins of his chariot to Krishna. It's a beautiful metaphor that's given as a teaching for us in the middle of the war. Well, in the middle of our lifetime battles that we all go through. The teaching is put the reins in God's hands. Yeah, you got to do your part. You've got to stand up. But keep the reins in God's hands. And you're trustful. Knowing you're going to be caught. Knowing the universe is there for you. And knowing that in that sweetness of surrender comes everything. I mean, think about it. Think about it for a minute. Think about hugging somebody, okay? So just close your eyes for a minute and just think about hugging someone you love. Family member, a spouse, a best friend, a child, a tree. Now, as you hug that loved one, and you feel one with that being, imagine yourself holding your body very, very tight, very strong, like you're afraid you shouldn't fall over. You shouldn't lean into them too much. You want to make sure that if they back away, you're not going to fall. So now you have to hold yourself very strong, very tight. Don't lean in too much. All right, open your eyes. Do you notice the difference between the beginning part and the second part? If you've got to hold your body really, really tight and really stiff, making sure that you don't, fall into the hug. Well, it takes that out of the embrace, doesn't it? If I've got to make sure that, I don't fall too much into you. When you think about hugging someone who's really, really, really old and frail, like if you were going to hug your 100-year-old grandmother or grandfather, you'd be really, really careful, right? Really, really. Now, it's sweet, you love them, but you're not able to completely have that experience as you are with someone that you can just fall into, right? And it's the same thing with the divine. If you're holding yourself back, if you're afraid to really let go into the arms of the divine, you're going to miss it. Let yourself go. You'll be caught. Doesn't mean everything's always going to go your way. Doesn't mean everything you want's going to happen and that which you don't want won't happen, Life still happens. But life happens when you're in the arms of the divine, rather than life happening when you're stiff and contracted and separate and alone. Beautiful. Yeah.
Pranam Sadhviji. So how do you deal with situations when you know what's correct and incorrect, but you still lead on to the wrong path, either because it's too easy or it's too tempting?
So, giving in to temptation that we know is the wrong path needs to be dealt with in two ways at two different times. There's tools and techniques for that very moment, but what's even more powerful is if you can work with it the rest of the time as well. So if you know that you've got a temptation toward and just for your your reputation in Egypt. I don't actually know this beautiful woman, so the examples I'm going to throw out are not actually what she's struggling with. I'm just throwing them out as examples. If you know that you're struggling with lying or infidelity or alcohol or drug use or stealing, before you get into a situation where you're going to be tempted to engage in those behaviors, you work with it inside through this power of discrimination. What am I going to get from that? Is it really worth it? You feel so badly afterwards, right? Immediately afterwards, the next day, there's fear that you're going to be found out, that people are going to know. So you end up living in secrecy, you end up living in lies, you end up living in a way that you've got to hide. So you suffer. So in your contemplation, in your introspection, really think about this. Why do I do it? What do I get from it? Make a list of pros and cons so that you can see very clearly this does not serve me. Here's how it hurts me. Here's how it is preventing me from actually moving in my life the way I want to go. Whether being healthy physically, healthy emotionally, healthy spiritually, whether having healthy, meaningful relationships, whether living honestly, living dharmically, living righteously. Whatever it may be, these giving in, living the wrong way, you know is hurting you. Every night when you go to sleep at night, your own mind knows, I live the wrong way. Means the mind essentially says, I am a wrong person. And that is a very, very damaging way of thinking. Whether you are ever caught, ever found out, whether you ever get any negative karmic fruit for it or not. Having to go to sleep every night and look yourself in the mirror, knowing I do things that I know are wrong, is already punishing yourself. Being able to look in your own eyes in the mirror, being able to look in God's eyes in the temple, whatever aspect of the divine we worship, being able to look at God knowing, yes, here I am, not feeling ashamed. That's the greatest gift in the world. Knowing that you're living clearly and truly, and baki to unki achai. But at least from your side, that you're living as fully, truthfully, clearly, dharmically, with integrity. And then what ends up happening also is your strength as a person increases. When you know you are a right person, behaving rightly, there becomes a power in your words, in your presence, in your actions, because you are moving from truth. That's the power where positive leaders have. Social leaders, political leaders, but those who are infused with awareness of their own righteousness are those who really have the ability to mobilize others on the right path. So you owe it to yourself. And then in that moment, this is where you need mindfulness. Because what ends up happening is we get swept up. We get swept up, we do it, it's out of habit. We've done it before we even realize we've done it. And this is where a practice of mindfulness is so important. So that you can actually be aware before you do it. You can actually be aware of that feeling of desire, of lust, of greed, of yearning, of anger. You can actually see it and feel it coming long before it has swept you up. And you're able to just look at it. Ah, hi desire. Hi anger. Hi old habit. I see you. You don't get the keys to the car today. I'm driving now. And if you can see it, then you don't give in. So develop a practice of mindfulness, a practice of being aware through your meditation, through your life. Live as mindfully as you can. Little things when you walk, when you drink, when you eat, whatever you do. Do it as mindfully as you can. To develop a practice of just being mindful of every moment. Such that when that temptation arises, you will be mindful of it. And realize that you're strong. You're stronger than any habit in the brain. You're stronger than any biological chemical. Just because there's a chemical flowing through your body doesn't mean you have to make a certain choice. You're stronger than that. Own that. Know that. Stop kidding yourself that you're weak and small and helpless and powerless. Own that. You've got it. Own that ability. You've got it. Now use it. And have friends support you. 1, 2, 3. Have sort of an accountability group. Check in every day. Right? This desire arose, I didn't do it. Or I'm feeling really like, I want to do it so badly. And then other people will support you. Come together. Use also that power of those who love you. Okay? Beautiful. Last tonight, yeah.
Pranam Mata. So, often following the path of compassion, what I encounter, like a lot of people might be encountering people taking advantage of you. And that cycle does not stop. Even no matter how much faith you show in people, how many chances you give them, and that it comes back on us. So how do we, what should be the action for that?
Great. So you follow the path of compassion and people walk all over you. What to do? So being compassionate, being spiritual, I always say, it doesn't mean you are a doormat. Look at Gandhi. I mean, if you need a better example of the strength of compassion, look at Gandhiji. Being compassionate doesn't mean I let you walk all over me. If I've got a child sitting in my lap and there's a diya in front of us, a candle in front of us, and the child keeps reaching for the candle, and I keep gently and lovingly taking the child's hand away from the candle. And then the kid starts to cry because it looks really beautiful. Flickering candle flame, the child really wants to, starts to cry, I want it, and keeps grabbing for it. And I move the hand away and the child keeps grabbing, and then maybe I go on the hand. Okay, just a little bit harder than necessary, just enough to shock that child into pulling their own hand back. Just enough to create a neural pattern in that child's brain of reach for flame, pain. So that when the child is somewhere other than in my lap and sees fire, they're not going to reach for it. Now, on the one hand, you could say, well, the compassionate thing to do would be, for God's sakes, let the poor kid grab it. I mean, is it compassionate to actually kid's hand? Well, when they're too young for you to actually explain to them what fire means, what burning means. If you've got a little kid who you know is really geared toward fire, a little bit of association of pain with fire is actually a very good thing. It's the same technique that, in psychology we give people who want to break bad habits of taking a little rubber band, and you put the rubber band around your wrist. And every time you, for example, have a thought of judgment or negativity, or every time you complain, or every time you use a profanity, or whatever habit you're trying to break, you just take that rubber band and you flick it once on your wrist. Because this part of the body is really sensitive, and it really hurts. And slowly what actually happens is your brain develops a neural network that as that negative thought just begins to form, the brain goes, no. It knows the minute that thought is fully formed, it's going to be in pain. And so you actually are able to train yourself away from negative habits through just a little bit of negative reinforcement. Now, you could say, well, that's not being very compassionate to yourself. It's not being very compassionate to the child. But it's certainly in service of a greater good. Gandhi was compassionate to the Britishers. He didn't harm them, kill them in any way. He didn't harbor thoughts of negativity toward them. But that didn't mean he was going to let them walk all over him. And this is where, as I was explaining to the beautiful woman next to you earlier, when we surrender and trust, it doesn't mean we check our common sense at the door. When you embark on a path of compassion, of loving kindness, of spirituality, it doesn't mean that we leave our common sense there, that we become doormats. You can be strong and compassionate. Sometimes being strong is more compassionate than not being strong. As anybody who's ever dealt with someone through what we call tough love has ever had to do. It hurts, it's hard, and it's the best thing for that person in the service of a higher good. And remember that when you are on a path of compassion, that you are part of that which you are being compassionate towards. So a lot of times we become compassionate and loving to others and we forget ourselves. So remember that a path of compassion includes you. Is a particular choice compassionate to you? If not, don't do it. Now that doesn't mean compassionate to your ego. It doesn't mean compassionate to your desires. It doesn't mean, going back to the woman who asked about temptation, it doesn't mean, well, you really want to do it, so just do it. That's not actually compassion, because you're just going to regret it later and feel miserable later and suffer later. But you do have to be compassionate to your heart, to your dharma, to your life path, to your freedom. Sometimes those of us walking paths that are not exactly what our family members had expected of us. You find yourself in this interesting situation of, well, to be compassionate to them seems like it would be to give up your path because it's not what they expected. But then you realize, well, actually no, because that's just compassionate to their ego that had an agenda of what things were going to look like. But actually by being compassionate to your truest, highest dharma, it actually is being compassionate to their truest, highest dharma. That may be very different from their mind that had a specific agenda or desire. And so compassion is very deep. And it certainly does not endorse or approve of or create situations where we should be walked all over. Have compassion for yourself. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And as I mentioned in the beginning, tomorrow is the sacred day of Mahashivratri. We will have a special Shivratri program tomorrow in the evening after Satsang, back on the banks of Ganga. I'll remind you about that tomorrow, but just to put it out there in your planning. We have actually a full day of beautiful Shivratri programs, starting with yoga in the morning. We actually have beautiful yoga classes every morning, followed by our sacred yagna, the sacred fire ceremony. The yoga's at 7. The fire ceremony is at 8:30. Tomorrow morning after that, there'll be a beautiful procession. Then, of course, we have our sacred arati. We'll gather back here for a special Shivratri satsang with meditation. And then tomorrow in the evening, we'll gather in the middle of Ganga, on the platform where Shiva sits, for a very, very sacred meditation, abhishek, prayer, and chanting. That'll go tomorrow from 8:30 to about 10:30 or 11. And then those who want to stay awake all night tomorrow night we'll shift into our satsang hall for actually an all evening, an all night prayer and bhajan and kirtan, but we'll shift inside just because it gets quite cold in the middle of Ganga in the late night. So we'll shift from there inside. So we hope that you'll join us for at least some, if not all, of the beautiful programs. And if you didn't memorize everything I just said, don't worry, there's a flyer as you walk out through the reception area, a beautiful flyer that gives the whole schedule of tomorrow's programs. So have a beautiful, beautiful night and a beautiful morning tomorrow as the sun comes up on Mahashivratri.